in Sonoma County, California. Jamie is fairly well known, I think, in fans of the West Sonoma coast for producing really delicious Pinot Noir and Chardonnay wines. And he is celebrating his 20th anniversary as a winemaker. And Kristen is his wife and business partner, and also a PR person in food and wine in Northern California wine country in her own right. So I'm happy to have them here today. Kristen, Jamie, welcome.
Thank you,
Hi,
Dave.
Dave. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. And I had the pleasure of visiting Jamie a couple of months ago when I was in Northern California. I didn't get to connect with Kristen because she was busy with the Healdsburg Wine and Food Festival, which she was representing. But the key point, that one of the things that I really am eager to talk to Jamie and Kristen about, is their changing paradigm for Kutch wines. This is the 20th year that they've been purchasing fruit from various vineyards along the West Sonoma coast and also Santa Cruz Mountains. But this will be the first year that Jamie will be harvesting his own fruit from their own vineyard that they bought a few years ago and planted near Sebastopol. So that's really kind of an exciting time and a big evolution for Kutch wines.
For sure. We're excited by it. COVID finally gave us an opportunity to purchase some land, and I'm here today. Kristen is back east, but I was on the tractor since about 6:30 in the morning, and yeah, we're getting ready for our first crop. So we purchased the property. It's 12 acres 5 years ago, and we quickly planted about 7 acres of grapes. And so quite a long journey to get to this first vintage. So yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we'll have some great quality fruit to make some great wine out of.
Well, and it was not a existing vineyard when you bought it, correct? It was an apple orchard.
That's right. It was an old apple orchard. This area, Sebastopol, has been, farmed for different produce, and through the ages, it's been everything from nuts then to Gravenstein apples, and now it's predominantly grapes. And so it was quite a lot of work to pull out about 7 acres of apples. We got a couple of chainsaws and started sadly cutting down apple trees. Every one I cut hurt a little bit of my heart, but we saved about 2 dozen of them, and then now we've planted grapes. We have about, again, I think I said 7 acres. We have about 5 acres of Pinot Noir and 2 acres of Chardonnay.
Okay. Well, we'll delve more into that in a little bit, but I'd like to back up and ask you your origin story, as it were. How
Right.
did Jamie and Kristen become wine growers?
Oh boy, it's a good one. Kristen and I had met on the Long Island Railroad, commuting into New York City. Kristen did publicity PR, and I was a NASDAQ trader for Merrill Lynch. So we had a nice conversation on that railroad train ride into New York City, exchanged contact information, and sort of traveled the world. Our passions were food and wine, and yeah, just enjoyed the culinary pursuits of what everything wine and food were. Um, Kristen had a great successful career, and I had a successful career. But after 9/11, I think we both had this yearning for something different or more. And so we had taken a trip out to California. Um, and I asked Kristen if she would want to go on an adventure and come out to California with me and open a wine brand. I had been given an opportunity by another winemaker who said, "You seem very interested, very passionate. Why don't you come out to California and I'll help you get started? I'll show you the ropes." So that gentleman's name was Michael Brown of Costa Brown. So not too soon after we got on a plane, gosh, I figured we'd try it a couple years. Maybe if it didn't work, we'd go back to the rat race of New York City. And, I think we fell in love. We live in San Francisco. Now we have this property in Sebastopol, which we'll move to in another couple of years. And it's been quite a ride and quite a journey.
Well, that's great. And Kristen obviously has set up her own PR business out there and
Yeah.
is thriving. And just as an aside, It was, I forget exactly when, but it was several years ago, pre-COVID. I was emailing with Kristen. She had reached out to me for one of her clients or one of her events, and I said, "Well, I'm coming out to California." And she said, "Well, is there anybody you want to meet?" And I said, "Well, I keep hearing about this guy named Jamie. Can you tell me anything about him?" And that's when I realized that you two were partners in life as well as business. So that was great.
It was so nice to have you out.
But but you 2 are kind of, I mean, I think a lot of winemakers or not winemakers, wine lovers sort of have in the back of our minds that, yeah, it would be nice to move to wine country and actually and make wine, but or be part of the wine community out there. And you 2 have actually done it. And that's pretty cool, I think.
Thanks.
So
Well, thank
so
you.
you get there and you work a little bit with Costa Brown. And, I guess some others, but how did you then decide to get started with Kutch Wines?
Well, that very first year, I helped, with Michael Brown and Costa Brown making all of their wines. And at the end of the harvest, they allowed me to select 6 barrels to make my very first vintage. That was in 2005. And, but, Kutch came to fruition right immediately therein after, developing the wine label and trying to find fruit sources for ourselves. And so the brand started pretty, pretty quickly about after landing here in California. Um, we always had a focus on Pinot Noir. That was almost for a full decade. And then in 2014, finally, we started to make some Chardonnay. Um, so it's been adventurous. I think the style has changed since those first 2 vintages. Today, I like to make food-friendly wines, lower alcohol wines, fine wines with tension from high acidity and with some tannin. And what's neat is you can make great wines, but unless the story is told, it's pretty hard to sell wine. So that's where Kristen, the secret weapon, has really come in with her great skills of public relations and PR. She's been fantastic in getting that story out there, even for this interaction right now. But we've had the privilege of being on the front cover of Entrepreneur magazine and United's handout on the airplane and on television, and on. And it's been fantastic. So I think we've, as a synergy, as a husband and wife, really worked well and parlaying both of our skills to build something memorable and exciting and great.
That's a very good point because I know several winemakers who had their dream and followed it to make wine, and then were like, "Oh, I have to sell it." And, and then the ones who complained most about it turned out to be really good at it,
Yes.
anyway, so what was it about Pinot that attracted you in the first place and also to the West Sonoma coast and the vineyards that you were working with?
Pinot Noir, I think, Kristen and I would go out to dinner and we would try Cabernets and we would try Australian Shiraz and we would try German Rieslings. And German Rieslings really piqued our interest. We would have them with shrimp on the barbecue and like the acid really spoke to me and Kristen. We loved how that acid cut across fat of the sauce or, the fat of fish. And so in terms of reds, I think in terms, in the characteristics of Cabernet, Pinot Noir had a different lifting aromatic, an elegance of femininity to it, and we really gravitated towards that grape variety. I think that suited both of our palates a little bit more of a preference versus the more powerful, bigger, richer Cabernet grape. We of course still, you know, don't have a problem drinking cab at all. I think that just, I think it feels like we probably drink 8 bottles of Pinot Noir to every 1 bottle of Cabernet. So, just that journey, a trip together. Let's go to Burgundy and see where Pinot Noir shines elusively. Gaining access to some of the great domains there and tasting and learning and speaking. And so, yeah, I think that was natural. I also know that back in New York on the trading desk, after hours, I would set up geeky wine dinners with 8 or 10 guys, and we would put into bags the blind bottles and do all that really compulsive nerdy stuff of drinking and tasting and talking too much about wine. And so in turn, the revelation came when Pinot Noir started to really climb and a lot of newer producers got into the space and then new vineyards got developed. Sideways came to fruition.
Right at about that time. So that was good timing.
That's right. I think, I had seen a Bloomberg article when I was on the trading desk that wine consumption had just surpassed beer consumption in the United States, and that was in and around 2005. So there was a lot of good trends. I try not to put on a business hat too much, but, there was a lot of things that sort of enamored us with California, including a visit to the French Laundry after watching an Anthony Bourdain show in the early 2000s and so on and on. We were ready for a new adventure, and here we are today, 20 years later.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of cool momentum at that time. I say Jamie was like an early blogger because while it was a lot of the geek guys, there were plenty of women involved as well. And it makes me think if Montrachet is still open, but it was this restaurant in New York, and we would go and they would have, no corkage Monday night. And so the whole dining room would be full of lots of people pulling wines out of bags, which I think is really neat. And we're at a time now where a lot of people are behind their computers and phones and aren't quote unquote going out as much. But it was a really exciting time to meet a lot of different people, and you'd be sharing bottles with the table next door. And I think that's what excites us about food and wine is the opportunity to meet people, make new relationships. And then now having the property is great because for someone like you, I've known you for, what feels like for forever. Now you're able to come and visit. So we have people that have been buying for years, want to bring out their significant other or their kids who are home from college or something like that. So I think the way that food and wine bring together people and community, is really a really fun thing. And, really watching that rise of Pinot and the excitement for, the opportunity to taste. And I think people really want to know now where things come from, right? That's always like, oh, somebody bought this, and now the organic product that I loved is, going to have all these extra ingredients. So I find that my community seeks out, businesses that are small businesses and owners, of things that they can trust, whether it's, a jelly or a oil or whatever it is, right? There's integrity knowing that a small business, you can, have the opportunity through the internet to, hear about what people are doing and how they make it. And then you have confidence in what you're buying.
And what drove you to the particular vineyards that you have been working with? Because you've had a pretty stable relationship with some of these, I believe, over the years. And you mentioned on your website and in our discussion when I visited you, Jamie, that you like the coastal influence and higher altitude.
Right. Yeah, I think the vineyards came to fruition just by tasting enormous amounts. There was in those early years, it was let's try every wine from anybody I can find on the available, and it was William Sellium and Swan, and we were tasting Russian River Valley and the West Sonoma Coast, and on and on. And so then it was geeky. You'd go to Burgundy and you'd learn about soils. So then it was, what kind of soils are there in California? And gosh, are there a lot. So you're tasting some wines on rock, some in sand, some on clay. And the light bulb starts going off on which ones and which style I am seeking, or that the style that I want to create and make. So I was, really keen at a point in my career where I had a coastal vineyard, and it was at 1,000 feet elevation, and it was planted in rock. And then I have another vineyard that's planted in sand, and that sits at about 300 feet elevation. So the differences are astronomical. The winemaking is the same, The coastal vineyard is very close to the ocean, and when the sun comes out at 6 in the morning, it immediately gets photosynthesis because it's at 1,000 feet elevation. The vineyard
Which,
closer,
why don't
yeah,
we give the names of these vineyards? You're
yeah,
still
of
going
course,
to
sure. So that first vineyard is called McDougal Ranch, and that's about 2.5 miles from the ocean at almost 1,000 feet. And so that vineyard is planted in a rock, and it makes a very strong, tight, concentrated, inky wine. And also, it has judicious amounts of fruit, and because of the sunshine, again, sitting at 1,000 feet. Here, 9 miles inland in this neighborhood is a vineyard called Falstaff. That's planted in sand, and it's at 300 feet. So, as anybody who's been to California, we have large amounts of warm areas and cooler areas. At 300 feet, when the sun comes out at 6 in the morning, the fog is in the way. So it doesn't ripen right away until the fog either burns off or retreats back out to the Pacific Ocean. So that vineyard is much cooler, colder, and it's in sandy soil, so it gives you a completely different expression, more of an elegant expression of Pinot Noir. Just a quick note, when a vine is going down, it's looking for water. In sand, it can really drive down and travel down into that soil very easily. If we go to the beach and we pour a bucket of water into the sand, it disappears very quickly. Drainage is incredible. The other soil is a rocky soil. The vine is going down looking for water. It's really hard and strong uh, for it to try to get through. In turn, it makes very small clusters, very small berries. So there's great concentration. All this to wrap up and say significant differences between soil and climate. This is what I was after. This is what we're seeking early in my career, and it came to fruition. Now we're fortunately gifted with several vineyards that we purchase fruit from on several different soil types in very different climates.
And what are some of the other vineyards that you use?
We purchased some fruit down in the Santa Cruz Mountains. One vineyard is a Chardonnay vineyard called Trout Gulch. We're fortunate to share that with a couple other great producers. One is Arno Roberts, another is Cerritos, and then our Alfaro Family Vineyards owns the vineyard and farms it. That makes racy, really lemony, zippy style Chardonnay. Another in the Santa Cruz Mountains is called Mindigo Ridge, another fantastic vineyard that's farmed. All the vineyards are farmed organically, but this guy's dedication is um, paramount, near the top. He's in the vineyard every day working, and it's meticulous. So that's an exciting one. And then there's another one out on the coast called Bohan. That was one of the very first vineyards ever planted on the true West Sonoma coast. George Bohan's father planted in 1972 originally some Zinfandel. On that same road, any wine geeks that know Pinot Noir vineyards is Hirsch. He helped David Hirsch plant his first block, maybe about 8 years later, after having some success. So really a great neighborhood. Flowers is out there, Peter Michael. And we're just lucky to have some really great relationships with a lot of great growers. Believe me, it's taken 20 years to find a lot of these vineyards. At one point, I had 40, 50 letters in my car that were stuffed into envelopes, and I would drive around and see a mailbox with a vineyard and plop a letter in the mailbox until the postman said, "Hey, this is against the law. I don't want to see another, letter in the mailbox, I guess, because they didn't get their 35 or 40 cents."
Yeah. Um, and just to avoid giving any misperceptions to anybody listening, you're still gonna be working with other vineyards, right? You're not just concentrating on
Oh,
your
that is correct. Yes, absolutely. So we've maintained and we're continuing to work with. We have moved away from McDougal Vineyard, and so that's in the hands of someone new. I had worked with that vineyard for about 19, almost 20 years, and we've decided to relinquish that. But beyond that, yes, we're fortunate. Um, Although this year yields are so low, I've been told that I will not receive any Trout Gulch,
Mm.
and I was told that we'll receive likely no Pinot Noir from Bohan. So it just goes to show how hard or tough of a vintage it is,
And
crop wise.
what is keeping the yields down?
The weather, we just had real tough weather. There was a lot of what's called shatter when the fruit is starting to set on the vine. There was a lot of wind patterns and cool weather, and we just didn't get set with a crop for a Pinot Noir, and some vineyards on Chardonnay, depending.
Hmm.
So pretty heartbreaking. But I always say I'm in business with Mother Nature. Um,
It
besides,
is true, yeah, you'll hear people talk about it and show, and, everyone experiences it, right? Burgundy experiences hail, which can be so damaging, so things go up and down and, at least we'll still have some great fruit, but, just less of a crop.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad, but, at least, it's hopefully just 1 year. And,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so you mentioned, Jamie, earlier that your style evolved after the first couple of vintages, and that you've gone to a lighter, more food-friendly, lower alcohol style. When we spoke when I visited you, you mentioned also that you, I think, started out with 100% whole cluster on a lot of your wines, and you've backed off on that somewhat to about 50%, which would be part of that stylistic evolution, I guess. And, what else are you doing differently? And any of I think you also mentioned that when you started, you had money to buy some grapes, but not new barrels.
Yeah, good points. A lot, Yeah, so the styles evolved over time. I think, just as I learn more. Those first couple of vintages, I sort of wanted to lighten up the power and the weight and the flavor of the wine. And I went so far as to using my bare hand, to do punch downs to try to be incredibly gentle. I just used gravity only. I didn't use any pumps. What did all this do? I think the light bulb went on after two vintages or three about how important a pick date was. I think most winemakers, I said the large majority of winemakers in the world, if you said, what's the most important single factor in, making a wine? And most all will say the pick date is so paramountly important. Um, so I just really, truly started to pick earlier. Then for almost a decade, I started to use 100% whole cluster. Translation meaning leaving the stems on with the berries in the tank. That made incredibly aromatic, almost like a third or fourth dimension of smell and a texture of taste. What did I quickly learn was that California was going through some drought periods, and when we had almost 4 or 5 years of drought, sometimes the tannin was exceptionally hard in the wine. And I then turned and started to phase that back to now, on average, about 50% whole cluster. So that again was just really, truly a lesson. Now, in terms of new oak, you are correct. Earlier in my career, the cost of new oak was exuberant. That said, as I matured and I did purchase some of the best new oak you could buy, air dried, yada yada. I'll leave the specifics aside. I found that my wines weren't expressing the site as much, or the terroir, or the sense of place, because I could smell new oak and I could taste new oak. Now, another point I should make is that when I'm filling a tank up with stems, those stems are wood. So when I'm then punching down or using my feet to push down the berries down into the juice, just like making tea with a tea bag and extracting, that's called extraction. I'm punching not just the berries, but the stems down too. So I'm actually getting tannin or structure in the fermentation, and also it's framing the wine during the fermentation, and that wood is coming from the vineyard rather than going and buying French oak, French oak and having a French character or an oaky character in my wine. Subjective, opinionated, but it's what's worked for me. I found that the purity, and I think Kristen will attest to this too. We've just experimented and, tasted, and that's really what compelled us to make food
Yeah.
friendly, pure Pinot Noir.
Absolutely. And and as you were saying, it's, different vintages and it's different style. Like Pinot is a thin-skinned grape, right? So it can't, well, not can't, but, in our opinion, does better in that neutral oak. And playing with the stem inclusion, tasting old wines, the stems enables them to age for so long. Um, and so, yeah, you feel it out each year. Like, how is this tasting? It's tasting really juicy. Like, this is beautiful. I'm going to do, this bin with stem inclusion and not this bin. So kind of like in the moment, we decide, on the table when the fruit comes in. But yeah, stylistically, it kind of has evolved. And I love the tea bag example because, it gives you that sense of extraction. And then when Jamie was talking about pick date, which, is everything. And he always uses the example of, perfect piece of fruit, whatever your fruit is, apple, peach, you get it, you take a bite and it's like glorious. It's, you know, high acid, it's perfect. 2 days later you go and you have another one and then suddenly it's mealy. You're like, darn, what happened? Well, I missed the window. It was like epic on that day. And then sometimes you bite into something too early and it's really hard and there's not much flavor there yet. So that's why the pick date is everything. And when you're out there and you're tasting, you're like, oh yeah, this is it, right? Versus like, oh, this is too tart, we're not ready. So that's just, you can equate it to your own style of shopping for produce at your farmer's market or store. Picking it when it tastes best to you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you start creating the wines. As you mentioned earlier, you need a story to develop the market. So how did you start selling the wine, and how did you find your audience for that?
Great. Yeah, good question. I was a compulsive wine geek, as I told you, in New York City, setting up wine dinners. I was also enamored with the wine chat boards. There's one or two wine chat boards where a lot of wine geeks, hang out and talk too much about wine, post pictures of trips to wherever in the world they are tasting wine. And so I was a personality at a time where I was almost posting and writing and reading every single day. Middle of the day on the trading desk at noon, you'd be eating your lunch and you'd just scroll the wine chat board. Actually made some friends as well from that. In any event, I told the story on the chat board. I'm leaving my career. I quit my job for a large bank in New York and I'm moving out to California to follow my dream. It was a long story, but I had 400 people that signed up on my mailing list before I got on the plane. I'd never even made wine before. I had made wine in my New York City apartment, like from concentrate in a
Mhm.
5-gallon glass carboy.
Did you
So,
ever take that to your dinners with the bag? And
no, gosh, no. But so, the story goes is that, gee whiz, getting on the plane, I already had the start of a mailing list. Then, as you're on the plane and you're making your first vintage, Kristen connected with a writer and at Bloomberg Magazine, obviously financial markets, wine, neat story. And then boom, you're in Bloomberg Magazine with an article. So the press came and that continued to lift and build the brand. I proposed on the sorting table. I sent the diamond ring down the sorting table where Kristen then found it. Again, more sort of early, sort of now today it's Instagram and all the influencers. Gosh, that wasn't around in 2005, 6, 7. So all this to say, it was fun. It was catchy. It was exciting. But I really wanted to get serious because I knew, catchy and and this style would only take us so far. So I really got dedicated to learning, tasting, and really got into the nitty gritty of everything possible about wine. And so that propelled the story further. Today, if you were to go to my website and read the newsletter that I write once a year, it's pretty geeky. It's all about the weather and the soils and the climate and, the tension and on and on. So it's not necessarily as much of just a shtick as it was when it started.
Well, I will say that that's a great proposal story, but I think that you must have had your heart in your mouth hoping that she would see the ring and that it wouldn't just go into the crush.
That's right. Oh, for sure.
You know,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
It
optical
is. It
you
is
probably didn't
smart.
have an optical sorting machine, but that could just go, "Boop, nope, get that out
Yes.
of here."
It
Yeah,
was in the
it's
it was
true.
in the it was in the classic red square box, and the gentleman raking the fruit from the bin onto the table made sure not to put the fruit too thick so that she was able to find it. But it was quite a wonderful and fun day, and it was a
So,
great,
Yeah.
everybody else there was in on it.
that's
Yes,
right. Everybody
exactly.
else was in on it
Well, that's good. I hope there were photos and video that
for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. Photos and video. Well, and Jamie wanted me to have a good story. He's like, a lot of people just might propose in a quote unquote traditional way or what have you. He just wanted, it to be memorable. And we had just moved and, wanted a fun story to say. But now when you think about it with Instagram, you're like, wow, it's, people are constantly sharing, reveals kind of, it feels like all
yeah.
the time. But you will find if you ever work a harvest and you are going through the fruit, I found somebody's reading glasses. You find the craziest and coolest and neatest bugs that will, you're like, whoa.
Moths, right?
So yeah.
Yep. Matter other than grapes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, reading glasses, okay. The,
Well, the pickers bend down, right? They're picking and then they dump their bin in to the 1-ton bin. So it, comes off their head or their pocket or what have you. But we always make back to the person. So yeah.
yeah, well, that's good. You don't want complaints about reading glasses in your Pinot. But okay, so you had that 400 name mailing list when you arrived. So that's sort of like, I guess, crowdfunding almost before we even had that term. So how then did you and you said you mentioned the press coming out, so you got some notoriety. But at this time, you're mostly selling directly through club members through your list, and
That's
you're
correct.
but and not through traditional distribution,
That's
correct?
correct. Yes, our business model has mostly almost always been, the core of it is the mailing list. Still to the day, it took me from 2005 till 2012 to get to 3,000 cases. I've never really moved in production since then. It got to 3,000, and still today we make about 3,000 cases. I've never been one for a more personality, supersize me, kind of a culture of America. It's what I can manage. We have one employee besides myself and Kristen. The woman's name is Melissa, and she's fantastic. And so we got to that point and just held. That said, we don't sell direct 3,000 cases. So what happens to the rest? I would say 99.9% in California then go into distribution in the United States. So they'll ship the wine to New York, Texas, Florida. It makes it on restaurant wine lists, you know, uh, retail stores. Forgive me, I lost my train of thought for a second. But my business model was always, let's look into Europe. I started to work hard on trying to find an importer in London, and found somebody, sent them samples, and we started to ship, 10, 14 cases. Before you know it, it was then 250 cases. From London, I also worked hard to get the wines into the hands of a lot of wine critics over in Europe, Jancis Robinson and Jamie Good and Livets Magazine in Sweden, and on and on. from London, it parlayed out to Sweden, Norway, Germany, Austria, the Baltics, and so on and so on. And so that today is still a great market for us. We sell almost, gosh, maybe half of our wine to Europe, and distribution. I don't have a single distributor in the United States right now. Do yeah, maybe I might have one, maybe in Williamsburg or, that's, but
You
yeah,
basically, yeah, because direct
right.
to consumer and then a lot overseas, and I think that, you have a common sensibility in Europe, right? The wine is always present on the table, and for them, if they wanna take a trip to France or Germany or whatever, everything's like 2 hours, so I think they're open to trying new wines, and then, um I think also prices of Burgundy and maybe Bordeaux had risen, and sort of this new California style that was emerging also, um, lent itself to a lot of interest from those markets too.
Okay.
For sure.
And, all right, so now then COVID happens, and as you said, that gave you an opportunity to buy this property just outside Sebastopol, the apple farm, and plant 7 acres or so of grapes, Pinot and Chardonnay. So tell us what that's been, and I guess the reason it's so exciting right now is because this year you will be harvesting your first crop from it.
That's correct. Yes, yes. It's been amazing. It's like almost like a new job or a second, a new, another career, or like, the work you're never finished with the work on a farm, on a property. There's always more work to do. And, while we have 7 acres of grapes of Pinot and Chardonnay, we have an acre and a half of apples, old 50-year-old Gravenstein apples and other varieties. We have a humongous garden of flowers and food. Um, we have a worm room where we take care of worms. What are the worms for? They're for feeding the soil and, vermicompost, the microorganisms that come from that. Um, so all of it is just, you're never finished, and it's exciting. It really brings a new energy and a new outlook into farming your own
Well,
food, or as well as grapes.
yeah, well, tell us about, how you are farming the vineyard, and you
Sure.
mentioned that you've only worked with organic vineyards in the
Correct.
past, so you have that sensibility there from the beginning. Now that you have your own vineyard and you're the one responsible for doing all these things and not taking the shortcuts,
Right.
uh, with the chemicals and whatever, and I definitely wanna hear more about the vermicomposting. That just sounds so
Sure.
needy, geeky, fun thing, so
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the work is endless. So today I was on the tractor. I got up at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm doing under the row. There's a knife that cuts underneath the vine, and is cutting the weeds. Now, two ways to do it. One, you could get Roundup and spray it. It would probably cost $500 and you'd be done in a day. You could spray the whole vineyard on each side. Um, or you could do, this under the row, which could take 5 full days because the tractor is moving so slowly. Other points, when the vines were very young and they were just coming online, there's the rootstock. They put a graft union and then they put Pinot Noir or Chardonnay above it. It's so delicate. You have to be so careful that you need to go in with shovels to dig around the vines, to get the weeds, to keep the competition away. So just a pass of, I don't know, 14 guys going through here for 2 days could cost $9,000 compared to, buying your Roundup for $500 and spraying it with a tractor and driving it through. The expenses is astronomical, as is the labor. We've always, since the beginning, done it from day one the right way. I would never, farm or put anything of that inkling onto my grape synthetic fertilizers or anything of the likes. The farming approach here is, I like to use the word holistic. You'll have a lot of people who will use a lot of different words. They'll use organic and, now regenerative is a popular word, biodynamic, and holistic just sounds like a fun one to me. I usually don't even use any words. I guess, you know what my word is? We do the right thing. And in turn, I
Yeah,
didn't want to
incorporate.
plant. Yeah,
You should do explain cover crop too, which is like how you're getting the good things in the soil. But you're right,
right,
it's holistic, it's doing the right thing, all the
right.
elements that come together.
Yeah, we didn't want to plant fence post to fence post with vines. So it was purposely that we left some apples in. We've planted a ton of other species of fruit. We have dried flowers behind me. I think there's some garlic back there too. So, we want to eat and have just part of the land and be a part of the land. So cover crop is great. The cover crop helps with nitrogen fixing and, bell beans and et cetera, and clover and everything going into the soil. And eventually we'll get to a no-till situation where we're again helping, with the planet and the earth sequestering carbon down instead of, letting carbon up into the atmosphere. So beyond that, you can't do that for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years because you must allow that vine to get established and drive down into the soils. This year, we're at every other row. So one row gets tilled, another row doesn't. What else? Yeah, it's, so we're not planting again fence to fence and the goal, the idea, the next step is to plant a very large oh, basin for water so that we get more insects and more frogs and but we have hummingbirds here, and I'll take you on a little walk, and why don't we just keep on talking while I show you some if I could. Is
Sure.
that okay with you?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. Um, so here's some of the garden here, and it's just been amazing. I guess it's funny because I'm showing you the garden. I'm almost as proud of this garden as I am of the vineyard. But it's California, so you can grow it all. Look at this corn. We do have the vineyard back here, and so here's a row that has not been cultivated, and here,
Uh-oh.
soil is much, much warmer than this soil. And this soil here, because it has a covering on it. Another point is that all the microbial life under the soil is still intact. The fauna, etc. If you've ever thought about or seen, trees, how they communicate, or like mushrooms, they're sending signals to each other and talking almost to each other. This is protected. This sadly is not. Now, am I proud being because I need my vine to get established? So, I hope that next year we're going to not have to till and that we can keep cover crop in all of our, the cover crop has mostly died off by now and we've had to cut it, but it's fantastic. What else can I show you? Let's see.
Show us the vermicomposting.
Oh, that would be great. Sure. Um, yeah, but what we're trying to do really here is we have bee boxes in the back. There's about 3 of them. And those bee boxes are huge log hives. So it's made out of a tree trunk, and we don't take the honey. That's just where the bees are. It's another like kind of the thought of like holistic. The way nature that bees lived was they lived in trees. And so we have those 20 feet up in trees. These are a lot of the dried flowers, so we'll take all of our flowers and dry them. And then in the off season, we'll make wreaths out of them. This is actually some of the vine from the vineyard, the vines. This is our compost tea
Maker.
maker. Yeah. And we can fill this vessel here with about 50 gallons of water. This is where we can put our compost. And if you look in the bottom, we have stones that then bubble the water. We turn this on for 24 hours. Why? What does this do? We put compost in here, and compost can be in the form of manure, cow, horse, chicken, bat, quam, anything that has microbial life and is healthy for plants goes in here, the solid. The liquid is here. This gets leached out into the liquid, and then it's an easier form to use, much more versatile than just taking this and sprinkling this on a plant. So you're getting the microbial life. Here's the most amazing microbial life. The highest numbers that you can obtain are from worms. And let's take a look here. So these are red wiggly worms. And in this bin is somewhere, in excess of maybe 75 to 100,000 worms. We feed these worms maybe once a week. They get food scraps. We have
things
strawberries
from the
here.
garden.
Right, for sure. And they'll also get gently composted manure. So the worms have no teeth. They don't have eyes, and they eat this and they turn it into vermicompost, which is poop. And I have that on my hand, so I'll be sure to watch that. But the key here is the microbes. So they're in the hundreds of millions. This much vermicompost has literally hundreds of millions of microbes that you'd have to see under a microscope. How do I get the vermicompost out though, without disturbing, the worms? Well, the key there is that there's a winch, and the winch has a knife that cuts the bottom 1 inch. So we'll crank the winch, and then the vermicompost will fall from the bottom onto the ground. And then we can take that. Now, I can just take the vermicompost and put it into a plant, put it on a plant, and then water it in, and it does great. That said, from hundreds of millions, when you put it into the compost tea, it goes into the billions. More life in a cup worth than all the people on the planet. And that's magic. I have seen it firsthand so many times. It's amazing to see a plant that's not really that healthy and that strong, and giving it a good dose of vermicompost, and how within 24 or 48 hours it has neon tips coming out. So what does all this do for grapes?
Neon tips?
Neon tips.
New growth coming from a plant.
Yeah, neon
It'll be like
green
neon
tips.
green, like little, we've like resurrected friends' plants. They'll be like, oh my gosh, this thing is dying. Please help it. You put the vermicompost on, and it's like suddenly it's shooting out new little life. And it's like that beautiful bright green from the struggling kind of wilty looking plant.
Yeah. So exactly. So the key, back to the point is that it just really helps protect the plant. The bugs and the vermin, all the little critters and everything don't want to eat. They're not interested really in eating my grapes. They'll go to the neighbors. They'll go a couple of blocks away and maybe eat theirs. That plant is weaker, maybe because that individual has used synthetic fertilizers or weakened the plant. So you're really amazing, and it's very popular in the food industry. Vermicompost isn't quite as popular in grapes. A lot of people will put it in the ground when they plant a vine, but oftentimes that's it. We're making the vermicompost and then injecting it into the drip irrigation. And so each vine gets dripped, small amounts, and it creates just healthy life. So that's the name of the game, is healthy soils, healthy plants, great product. I think it's beyond really winemaking. It's beyond whole cluster. It's past like how much stem inclusion. Um, if you gave Thomas Keller of the French Laundry McDonald's ingredients, it would taste like shit. If you give him a garden across from the French Laundry, with food that's been grown and nurtured and carefully crafted, and it's exquisite. It's 3-star Michelin, and I think that's. Am I trying to get 3-star Michelin here? I don't. I don't think so. But
Well,
you know,
models to aspire to.
right? Yeah, and then it's doing the right thing too. We'll live here. And so in turn, you just want the right thing on the land.
Well, I think we've seen the evolution of Jamie Kutch here
Yeah,
from wine geek in New York,
yep,
geeking out about Pinot Noir and Cabernet and whatever, to
sure.
a farmer geeking out about compost,
Right,
and that's pretty good. And it looks like you're setting up your own little bit of paradise there. You mentioned that your hope is to move from San Francisco up to there with your family. You and Kristen have a son, Clayton, I believe,
right.
and
Yep, yep.
uh, who I met when I was there, and he seems to really enjoy being around the farm. So that's great. And you've been making your wine in Sonoma, but you're going to move that to the new place too, eventually?
Right, so we've been making the wine in Sonoma near the Sonoma Square. We did get permitted for a winery and a tasting room here. Now the wine industry is sort of in seeing tough times, so that's on hold for the moment. But that's an option someday. That permit doesn't expire, so we'll see where that goes. And I will die happy with one estate, vineyard. You never know. Maybe there's one more in us someday. I have no idea. I think that it's been so much work, so much time. Let's see where this one goes before the thought of another one ever comes into play.
Well, will having your own vineyard enable you to expand production? I mean, you mentioned the market. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the right time to do that, but
I
eventually.
I think I think I'm more of the lines of like wasn't trying to was one of the reasons why I relinquished, McDougal Vineyard, because I can only stretch so much. I'm just not that guy that wants to have, 4 or 5 employees and working that hard. I'm really keen to try to handle a lot of it myself with one other, and in turn, so production should not go up.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're also making a little bit of brandy, I understand?
Oh, yeah, that's fun. Yeah, sure. I should go into the house and show you the bottle if I can. But the brandy, so that came because, the traditional Burgundy thought is you make, you know, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and sometimes they'll take the lees, the ending of the barrel of wine, the last gallon from every barrel, and they'll distill it, and they'll make a what's called fin de Bourgogne. And so in turn, for almost 10 years, I was pouring our lees, our muddy ending of the substance, 1 gallon from every barrel down the drain. And I said to myself, man, in Burgundy, you'd go on a trip and after the meal, you'd have a glass, and it was amazing and fun. So I said, why don't we try and make some of this? I don't know of others that were making much of it. I know there are others now after doing the research that also produce it, but it's just not that common. So it's been fun. It's 90 proof. It's got a little bit of a wallop to it. A sipper when your throat is hurting, and or you just need to, a little bit at the end of a long day. So it's been rewarding and fun. We age it for 5 years in a used barrel, not a new barrel, because I don't like that heavy char again. And we usually make 90 to 120 bottles, sell it for $100 a pop, and it usually flies. I offer it to a couple of hundred people, and yeah, it's not really a commercial or a big offering of ours, but it's been great. One other neat thing is we have a vermouth coming out. Why vermouth? I don't know if I'm not certainly the hippest guy. I don't have a beard. I'm not in my 20s or
Little scrap.
30s. A little scrub. But it's again, partially it's a sign of the times almost. It's not that easy even to sell 3,000 cases right now with the market the way it is. So let's work hard and have something else creative in the portfolio. So I like drinking vermouth sometimes if I go to a restaurant, and I've always liked, Campari and bitters and stuff like that. So it was just something fun. Vermouth is basically we took Chardonnay, we took botanicals from our property, we took Meyer lemons, and we took dried cherries and some juniper and other
Tea.
botanicals and seeped them in higher proof alcohol. And that seeping process with the Chardonnay, the proof alcohol level is about 17% alcohol when you add the alcohol with the wine and those those fruits and flavors. And you get something compelling and fun. So that goes in the bottle in about 2 or 3 weeks. We'll make 30 or 40 cases of it. Not much, but yeah, just trying to think of creative ways to try to have different products out there and have some fun at the same
That's
time.
great. Well, that's we're running out of time, so I just one quick question. Now that
Sure.
you have your own vineyard, are you at all thinking of planting any other great varieties other than Pinot and Chardonnay?
Ooh, no. I think
Okay.
one variety that Kristen and I like a lot is Syrah. We both love Northern Rhone Syrah, but we also have always
Fine.
stayed. Yeah, we've always stayed more like, let's just stick to the Burgundian-ish model. I certainly am not trying to make Burgundy, but we sort of live at that temple of some of the ideas behind it. And you start bringing too much to the market, you start to confuse your customer base. And these small little riffs of like brandy and vermouth is almost kind of for us. We almost don't, a little bit here in sales, but no, I think muddying the water. No other varieties for us on the future.
Okay. Fair enough.
And we have some vinegar coming. We did a little vinegar project,
Oh,
which was
apple cider
really
vinegar.
fun, also from the apples. So, yeah, there's a lot of small, exciting things coming. So, yeah, so vinegar is one of them too.
Excellent. Well, I guess just to recap, people can find your wines through kutchwine.com
That's it.
and or go to London.
That's
Go
right.
to Sweden, I guess. And I usually end with a question of, what are Jamie and Kristen drinking when no one else is watching? But I think you've already answered that. You mentioned vermouth and Syrah and well, hopefully more than just your own wine, but that's the
Yep.
label for
That's the label. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, what I'll finish it up with one last story. What are we drinking? Boy, like I said in the beginning, we really love German Riesling, but we really love Northern Rhone. We love Allemande. And it's not uncommon for us to just drink a Aperol Spritz or a Campari and soda too. It's we're
Yep.
not
And
just
definitely a lot of champagne. Let us forget.
that's right. Yep, yep. So that's about a wrap. Thank you so much, Dave. We're real grateful.
Well, thank you both for your time and your help and everything. And it was great visiting you a couple months ago, Jamie. And your project is very exciting. I look forward to tasting your estate wine in a couple of years when you release it.
Great. Thanks so very much, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. And I will be working to put a transcript of this on my newsletter, Wine Line, so people can read it or listen to the recording as well.
Awesome. All right,
Yeah, that's
great.
great. And if anyone, yeah, hit us up on the website. Let us know. We'd love to meet fellow wine lovers and people who have been buying and, we've been chatting with. It's, in the last couple of years, I'd have to say we've met a lot of people in person that we only knew their names online. So it's fun.
And that's another point that we should stress, that people can reach out to you and schedule a visit to learn a little
Absolutely.
Yes, schedule a
Sure.
tasting.
Sure.
And again, best to do that through the website.
That's it, sir. Great.
All
Thanks,
right.
Dave. All
Well,
right. Have a
thank you
great
both.
day.
You
You got
too.
it.
Thanks, Dave.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.